I'm gonna call the meeting to order. It is 6 p.m. on June the 9th. And let the record reflect that all elected and appointed board members and our 2 student reps are here tonight. Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Dan, I know we need to move the superintendent's oath to its own agenda item. How about like right directly after the staff funding presentation?
Yeah, so superintendent's oath of office would be item number 2, and then all signature documents would be item number 3.
Can I get a motion to approve the change to the agenda?
I motion to approve the change to the agenda.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And I think we all know Dave is Kayla tonight, so if we can, there's only a couple that we need to do, but just make sure we're speaking clearly for Dave.
And I already missed the first thing. Who seconded that?
There's no second, just we only do a motion.
Okay, that's fine.
We have.
That is a good tune-in to kind of what to anticipate. First day to us.
We have no public comments this evening, so we can skip that. Does anyone have any questions on the consent agenda? There's just one item. Questions or comments on consent agenda? No? Can I get a motion to approve consent agenda?
I'll motion to approve the consent agenda.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? All right. We're already on to discussion of staff funding and it's only 6:02.
Very efficient.
Alright. Mr. Moon says I need to use this keyboard, is what he says. Okay, and you said the arrow keys will move me forward, Dave, is that right?
Correct.
The slides? Okay. Good evening, directors. The presentation that I have here in front of you, some of this is admittedly information that I have shown you over the years before. Some of these slides are been recycled from previous presentations. But it does, I think the goal in this was to expand upon some of the points that we've talked about before and dig just a little bit deeper to get to some things that are things that you have expressed interest in having a better understanding about. So we'll try to do that. I guess I'll preface this by saying as you go through this education funding and how we do some of these calculations, there is no real playbook to this. As one person looks at this, another could have a very valid way of presenting it in a different manner. But this is the methodology that I have chosen, and I will try to explain the rationale for the things being presented. All right, so just a quick review. This is a slide I've used a few times. The prototypical school funding model, you hear this over and over and over. This is a funding mechanism of how you are allocated staff, okay? So we'll quickly go upon it. It was from 2010, so it's 15 years old. It says a prototypical elementary school will have 400 students, K through 6. Again, just a side note, we're K5, but that doesn't matter. They fund you at a K6 grade span, regardless of what your orientation or breakout is in your district. Middle school, 432 students, 7-8. Again, we are a 6-8. And then high school, 600 students is a prototypical high school for 9-12, which does match up with what we have. And again, this delivers funding, dollars, a pool of dollars to you. It does not designate or make for you any decisions as far as who you hire, how many you hire, what you pay the people. It makes no such designations. It is just a funding source of which the district then makes local decisions on staffing to best fit your needs or our needs, okay? Prototypical school is a fixed theoretical size that is used for modeling purposes. Funding is generated based on grade level reported rather than a school's classification. Again, when 6th grade is part of the middle school, 6th grade students generate staff at the elementary funding level. So that's a little bit significant because they fund you a little bit better at elementary than they do at middle, but I won't get too deep into that. Next slide. So the question then is, so we've heard, it said, how many staff does the model fund? Okay, well the total funded staffed FTE or full-time equivalency, we use that term a lot. Certificated instructional staff are often what's referred to in the model as CIS. It generates 134.85 positions, okay? We are currently staffed at 136.657 positions. Okay? Certificated administrators, referred to as CAS, we are funded at 8.411, and we are currently staffed at 11.6. And then classified, or CLS, this is where the big disparity happens. We are funded for 36.079, but you are staffed at 94.651. So you hear that a lot, this significant underfunding for classified. You know, you don't get funded for all the folks that you need to run a district. Well, this really sticks out. Now, I put a double asterisk there, it's important. Let's look down at the bottom. In 3 programs, they do not give you specific prescripted amounts of funded staff. The 3 programs are special education, child nutrition, and transportation. It says, however, these programs do not fund specific FTEs, but instead provide a lump sum of resources to hire staff, certificated instructional staff, and or classified staff. Let me go into a little bit more detail. For special education, instead of saying, oh, for special ed it funds 10 teachers and 5 classified and a half of an administrator. It doesn't work that way. Special education, it funds you salary per student. So what it does a calculation of how much salaries and benefits it's going to allocate times the number of students that are under an IEP, and it generates then a total pool of dollars based on that calculation. It doesn't say how many teachers it's funding or how many classified, it doesn't do it that way. Child nutrition is a different animal as well too. Child nutrition is funded predominantly by claims for from USDA for National School Lunch Program and School Breakfast Program. So you use those proceeds of those claims to in then turn hire staff. All the staff in child nutrition are classified staff, but again, you do not get any prescripted funded FTE. You're basically using those claims to have a pool of dollars at which you hire the number of staff that you need to run those programs. And thirdly, transportation. Transportation is funded on what we call the STARS system, S-T-A-R-S. It's based on ridership. So you again receive a pool of dollars based on the number of ridership. You have 3 count times that you do, and then it generates a total annual allocation as far as transportation. But again, transportation is primarily heavily skewed towards classified staff. So you have 3 programs, special education, child nutrition, and transportation that have a large number of classified staff, which are in that 94.651 number, but they're not funded prescriptively, so they're not included in the 36.079 number. Does that make sense? You get money to hire classified staff, but they're not specifically identified as being funded. So I know it's kind of hard to wrap your head around, but it's an important distinction. Because you might say, my gosh, we've got 55 people that we're not getting any funding for. You do have funding embedded within child nutrition, special education, and transportation. You receive dollars of which you use a good chunk of those dollars to hire the classified staff that are the difference between those 2 numbers. Okay. Does that make sense? And I know I'm trying not to lose people, but anyway. Next, funding. Okay, so how much do we get funded? For certificated teachers or CIS, the statewide average, you might hear this, what is the statewide average? Statewide average for 24-25 is $72,728, okay? What they do is we do what's called the S275 report, and all districts put in their salaries that they pay their certificated staff, and it comes up with a statewide average. Staff on the west side are more highly compensated than those on the east side, but this is the state average, okay? Certificated administrators, or our CAS, are funded at $107,955 per FTE. And the classified staff of the CLS are funded at $52,173. Okay. Those are your statewide numbers. But, lucky for us, we have a factor called regionalization. Regionalization is essentially a recognition that the cost of living in certain parts of the state is greater than in other parts of the state, okay? Rent in Seattle is more expensive than rent in Walook or something, like that. I'm just picking areas off the top of my head. So what we do, and we have for as long as I can recall, since it went back to McCleary, so 18, have received regionalization, which is a factor over and above. So in recognition of the cost of living, like similar districts, Sultan receives an additional factor, currently 18% above the base funding. So here's your base funding, and here you get an additional 18%. So that's the amount you actually get, is the $72,728 times 18%. They give you $85,819 per teacher, per funded teacher. Okay, not per teacher, per funded teacher per the model. That's an important distinction. You don't get funded 100%. You don't get funded one for one. Certificate administrative staff, you get the 107,995 plus 18%, you get 127,434. And classified, you get the 52,173 times the 18%, you get 61,564. Okay? Questions? All right, so then the question comes down to, okay, well, what do we get versus what do we pay out? So we chose to look at this from an aggregate level as far as how much total salary, how much, and versus what do we get versus what do we pay. For certificated instructional staff, just salary, not benefits, just kind of keep it a little cleaner. We receive $11,572,692 is what we're funded. We pay out $12,066,344 for a difference of just under $500,000, $493,652 short. So the amount paid exceeds amount received. Now, you do see an asterisk there down at the bottom. It says excludes the certificate instructional staff in SPED, because again, we talked about SPED doesn't fund specific positions. It just gives you a pool of dollars. How you choose to staff that, that's a district decision. And it does not include your contracted staff. These are just district staff. So in this case, I think we have 2.8 FTE of certificated instructional staff that are hired through agencies. They're not in this. I just basically pulled the dollars that we pay our people. So that number is actually would be larger.
So they would be charged at MSOC.
Yep, it would be under Object 7 in MSOC, correct. CAS, or the Certificated Administrative Salary, we're funded for $1,071,847 and we pay $1.911 million. So the difference of about $839,000. For classified, I'm sorry, I should say total, sorry, not average salary, we've changed this slide, I've modified it. $2,221,168 is the funded amount, and we pay out $3,973,000 for a difference of $1.75 million. So it really kind of brings home there the disparity between what it takes to hire and pay for staff necessary to run the district versus what you get. So your delta is about $1.75 million short. So the totals, the funded amount would be $14,865 and some change, and your paid out is $17,951 for a total of just about $3.1 million short. Okay. And again, I've got some various different footnotes down there, which are important as far as, because again, we've got those three programs that are kind of different: special ed, child nutrition, transportation. And then also too, under classified, it's important designation. Classified includes classified and classified administrators. There is not a designation within the prototypical school funding model for quote unquote classified administrators. I am a classified administrator, but I'm funded as a classified staff member. There is no separate designation for classified administrators, okay? So all of those, classified is just classified, okay? Next, so we got this $3 million shortfall, so how do we fund these people? How do we pay for these folks to keep the doors open and educate children and provide safe environments and all that sort of stuff? Well, federal funding, is a significant. IDEAB, which is special education. Title I, which is called disadvantaged. Title III, English language learners. And then obviously we talked about the National School Lunch Program. We submit and get significant dollars in the meals that we serve and are reimbursed. So those help hire staff to fill in that $3 million shortfall. State funding, or special purpose, you have what's called general purpose versus special purpose, but special purpose, special education. Money's received in program 21. So for Paul's folks, that's how we get a significant chunk of money, which again, is not prescriptive. We can hire a mix of teachers and classified staff that the district feels is appropriate, but that's the funding mechanism for that. Then we have what's called categorical funding. Learning assistance program, transitional bilingual instructional program, highly capable program. All of these fund FTE, but to make it even more complicated, categorical programs only fund certificate instructional staff. They do not fund classified staff. So that's a little different animal. Pilot grants, we have things called beginning educator support, which is BEST, TPEP, the STAR system, which is your funding mechanism for transportation. And then we get also what are called free meal supplemental for elementary students only, K through 5, eat for free, so we get a significant chunk of money back from the state to help fund those classified folks in our child nutrition programs. And then obviously the last fallback is your local property taxes. When you have exhausted these various forms of state and federal resources and you're still short, That's where you dip into your local resources, your local tax revenues, help support those additional staff that are not funded for via the prototypical school funding model. So bridging the gap, the funding model, it's again, a funding model, not a staffing model. Districts can hire whomever they see fit and pay whatever salaries to the party that the parties agree to or bargain to. It's not prescriptive. They give that autonomy is still rested in the boards, just like you. All 295 districts around the state, the boards are vested with that ability to make those decisions, okay? Prototypical funding model does not provide sufficient staff FTE to adequately run a district. That's pretty well known. It does not deliver adequate funding per FTE funding to attract and retain many positions, okay? So there's times when you have to, the amount that is necessary to hire is above what is provided. Prototypical school funding model does not recognize classified administrators who are instead funded as classified staff. I'd mentioned that as well. End result is too few positions funded at too low a rate creates an over-reliance on local levies to backfill the shortfall. So that's what you hear a lot of times is that districts are petitioning to raise the levy lid, raise the levy lid. Because that, for them, the voters that will approve it, that is a easy solution to their problem. But in many districts, that's very difficult and problematic to do that. So that is not a one-size-fits-all answer to the problem because there are uniquenesses to every district as far as what their citizens and constituents will accept. So, but that is it. That is my presentation. Questions?
Michael?
Nope.
Mike?
Great.
Karina?
I've already answered my own question, so.
Ladies?
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Dan, did you want me to do?
Yeah, so there's a second part to this, and it just goes a little more in depth in how we build the model to reach the budget that accompanies all of this stuff. And so that's called the RP, revenue to
Program
expenditure.
expenditure. Yeah. And I don't, this is, yeah, as Dan said, the RPE, revenue program expenditure, is a tool that we use. We have had, since I talked with you last, the F203, which is the official funding model, has been released. So you see the initial estimates were in green. The purple or the kind of the lavender, the second or the third column there is the updated or the F203 numbers. And by and large, they were pretty close, other than special education. We had about $180,000 difference. But excluding that, the difference was only about $9,000 between the initial estimates and the revised estimates. So they were very, very close. So we've gone through now and done several iterations of adjusting things based on the F203 and updated numbers. And it brought down, and Becky was working on some stuff, got a couple of minor updates this afternoon. Scroll down to the bottom, Dave. I want to make sure which one you've got here. Scroll down. That's a little old. That's a little older one. The most current one, as we had some adds and some takeaways, is our target again is 4% minimum fund balance to bring the board a budget that is a proposed budget that is no less than 4% anticipated ending fund balance versus prior year expenditures, which is about 1.677 million, that dark green colored bar there. Based on the most current one that I have, which is more current than this one, we are about $79,000 below that target as of right now. Couple of things of note that either are in there and or are not in there. Two things that are currently not in that negative $79,000 below target would be whatever decisions are reached as far as the weight room and upgrades to the weight room. That has not been formalized yet, so I don't have a number in there for that. I know there has been discussions as far as general fund continuing support of uniforms for ASB. That number is not in there yet. But one thing that is in there to our favor is scroll up just a little bit, Dave. Yeah, back up. So, I know you're looking at that one. Something that came out of the legislature as they tried to balance this significant budget shortfall that the state has, is they decided they're going to initiate a new tax. The new tax is going to be on services. The state has not had a tax on services before. The tax has been on goods. So this has raised a great deal of concern as far as special education is concerned, because they have a significant dollar outlay for what we call NPAs or non-public agencies, and also contract providers that we hire, psychologists, SLPs, OT, PTs, those sort of folks that are hired through, you might hear them it's called agency hires, we use that term a lot. I'm still trying to get some clarity, but there is general agreement that there will be a new tax on those services that has never been the case before. So what I have done is I have built in there, you can see in this note right here, I have built in $250,000 in capacity for anticipated sales tax on services. So that is a new cost. That might be high. We're still trying to get some clarity. Maybe we can feel comfortable in drilling that down to 200 versus 250. But I felt it was significant enough that I did not want to gloss it over. I wanted to at least acknowledge that it is something new that is coming. By purely sticking our head in the ground isn't gonna go away. I mean, it's gonna come, and we just need to recognize it. So there could be some savings there. We could claw that back from 250 to 200 maybe, or some number, so that would help a little bit, kind of get us closer to that 4% goal. So that's where we're at right now.
I have a question on just the difference in the initial estimates and then the updated estimates.
Yes.
School food services,
That's where we're at.
$3,300, but we're getting 200,000?
Yeah, I don't, Dave, do the comments work if you hover over that $200,000 number? Yeah, state supplemental lunch program payments were excluded from the initial estimate. I missed that. That's the for K-5 when we do free meals for all kids. The meals that we serve, the state gives us a reimbursement for that, and I had missed that in my initial estimate. So the 200,000 is a much more realistic number.
And
So that's one
ours-
where we were able to gain quite a bit of traction on that one.
And then our special ed, the 181,
Yeah, what that one is they went, you know, the only thing I could see there is that they changed the input value to a hard 25%. It went to a 0.25 where it used to be a variable number. And so the only thing I think is on the original one, we had a value greater than 25%, but when the final conference budget was enacted, it was changed to 25% and it drove fewer dollars. That's the only thing that I can see on that,
So to get this right, this new state matrix that you're going off of.
Mhm.
So we didn't get more, we're actually getting less from the new budget.
Yeah, Isaac, I think there was, like I said, the yellow column is the gains and the
we're getting
differences.
$50,000 less than we had thought we were gonna get.
Yeah, there's some, like I said, the special ed one was the biggest negative. But then as Gigi already talked about, the school food was a large positive.
The 250,000 tax on services that
Then
we've
schools
never
shouldn't
paid
be
before
touched by that, that's crazy.
just doesn't make a lot of sense. And I would encourage you to drive that number down. Where do you put it, I don't know, but it's such a distortion on the front end that, I've told Dan, let's go down 50,000 for sure.
So
We need to have some clarity. I mean, what we're trying to do is figure out a fund balance at the end of the 25-26 school year. Gold Bar we're already at our kindergarten enrollment allocation for next year. Very early for that number right now.
That's good.
That's really good. You don't know how it's gonna all shake out, but we're still in this phase where we've got more kids enrolling than we have moving or leaving, and we don't wanna get it so tight that we can't operate, because I will tell you, and just be right up front, there is a desire to add some more staffing at the middle school, and I understand I'm leaving, Chris is coming in, but part of what we're trying to accomplish is a model that really allows what it takes to educate kids. You're gonna see, when you see some of the assessment scores, especially in ELA, great gains that have been made. And part of that is because the staff have the time to work together to do the work they need, rather than just passing in the night. And, I would argue that we wanna put that in staff, but again, my opinion's gonna only be good for another week or two, so.
So how did you come up with 250,000 for tax?
the 250,000, so our budgeted for outside services for special education is 1.5 million. So I took 10% of that number, and then 10% based on an estimation of Dave's services, IT services are going to become taxable, and then Charlie has. So between the things that Dave is buying, or contract services between Dave and Charlie, is where the other 100,000 came from. 150 from SPED and 100 from other areas. Again, I would be fine probably going down to 200. I wouldn't lose a lot of sleep over that. I did network with some fairly high-level colleagues at the ESD. There was a statewide debrief last Thursday. Said it was not even mentioned, and I think the reason it's not mentioned is OSPI is not driving this train. This Department of Revenue is driving this train. So this tax is under the auspice of the Department of Revenue, not OSPI.
Did the
But,
tax pass the legislature?
Yes, yes. So, but the Department of Revenue is the one who will be implementing the rules related to this. But you will start seeing it on invoices that you receive, as I understand, from NPAs, from contract providers that we're hiring and so on and so forth. So it is a new expense, a new tax that the district, nobody has seen before.
Well, if they've passed it, then what percentage did they pass it at?
That's what I'm not sure if they're taxing it the same, I'm making assumption that it's at the same rate as sales tax on goods, which is in the upper nines, based on the jurisdiction, it could be 9.6 to 10%.
Wouldn't that be in the language of the bill?
I've looked at the bill has a lot of legalese, it's very lengthy, I'm not an attorney, there are some passages of it that I found pretty straightforward, but I was kind of hopeful that some people smarter than myself would kind of give us a high level debrief, and I have not seen that yet. So, but again, that's just a recognition, the number is not carved in stone, but I think it's a recognition that that is coming at some level and we need to budget for it.
Michael, questions, comments?
No, I'm good.
Mike?
And this is based on the FTEs that we loaded into the budget that we approved.
Correct.
And did you do it on the historical, or excuse me, the 24-25 NPAs and services estimate, or what you anticipate for 25-26?
Well, this number right here, it's based on this number, this MSOC number, 1,501,500. So it's basically 10% of that number is where you get the 150,000.
Where's the other 100,000?
Between Charlie's area, drive into Charlie and Dave's, into district-wide support. Because again, you're gonna get services and IT that have not been, so you're buying subscriptions, you're buying outside services, they're gonna be subject to tax, they have not been previously.
Subscriptions will be?
IT so if you're Edgenuity, or I'm just picking names out of the air.
We have always been taxed on
Right,
science.
you think?
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not new.
We'll take $10 and we're gonna tax
This would be on a service.
Tax it again.
Well, the software is a product, right? So Ingenuity is a product.
It depends on how it's classified, whether it's a physical good or whether it's access to a service.
We do have a lot of subscription services, but what we maintain on our services.
So we still need more clarity. Admittedly, we're still awaiting more clarity. So I'm
I
hopeful that
think-
we can bring that number down.
That item is the one that makes what we're doing right now more difficult, because it's a huge number. And you could easily argue school districts should not be paying this, but that's the way it is.
I'm
And
surprised we didn't hear about it from WASDA or anything, I mean, there was nothing about
I need to be in the
this.
news. I'm pissed. I'm sorry. I'm gonna be doing
Take
some-
yourself down to
I am
Olympia, well,
going
there's no one
down
there
that
right now, but.
It's just they had to get creative, I guess, to fill this huge budget gap. They were unwilling to cut services, so
they
therefore they had
take
to
from the
raise
very
revenues.
entity that- What do they do? They take it from us and give us back to us? Is that how it works?
Oh, I think it's gonna be something that would be
Tax-
claimable as far as
taxpayers.
safety
Funding
net
they're giving
for special ed. But again, it's still, there's still not the level of clarity. I was hopeful of just of a
They
release.
even
that
know
would-
what they did.
They've built into the budget what they estimate how many dollars this will bring in to help balance their budget, so yes.
Any other questions, Mike?
No.
Isaac?
Thank you.
Marianne? Cameron, Bella?
Thank you for your time.
Anything else to add to that, Dan, or is that?
No, I think in a nutshell, we've kind of figured out a way to do this and communicate. There's still a little work to do. Just want to say, thanks to Dan and Chris and everybody that participated. And if you have any follow-up questions after you think about it for a while, just shoot them off to us and we'll get you the answers.
Well, it looks like if we don't have any more students than we're budgeted for, and the tax is a little bit less, then we'll hit our fund balance that we wanna hit.
So we
But I think
were
we're gonna have more
kind of
students than
modest in what we did for student growth.
Yeah, that's why I was asking if this was on the FTEs that we projected,
Oh,
because it
yes,
was a little low.
it is. And we-
Because if the
Yeah.
FTEs come up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
we have not
right.
changed the FTEs from
No,
what board.
25
So it will help us
Same here.
a little
And I
bit, even though we're
agree,
probably gonna have to hire, but it should.
Well, I agree with Dan that money needs to go into staff, cause we,
Yeah, we
Absolutely.
need to, our educating our students needs to be our priority,
Mhm.
period.
Absolutely.
We have to do whatever we can to align our efforts to make that happen, bar none.
All right, thank you.
Ma'am, Madam Chair, can we have a brief update on, I see in his spreadsheet on the assumptions tab, positions in staffing draft 9 but on hold. It shows GBE Dean of Student 1 FTE, SES grade teacher 1 FTE, SMS social study 1 FTE, and district-wide homebound.
So we have made, and I apologize, that didn't get updated, we have made essentially those ones there. We made a decision at the last one to temporarily remove those at this point from the budget.
Okay, so we're not going to staff them in 25, 26?
They're on a list that if our enrollment or circumstances allow, then we will. Typically, I think the desire is to have those positions. But based on having an enrollment that we set to build a budget on and where expenditures are, especially with that $250,000 tax built in, there just isn't capacity right now to do that. These decisions often change as we get closer to start of school because we have, real-time information and it's usually better. So that's, I think, really what he's saying is when we first start, we think about a model that we need. Those were part of that. And I just talked about the middle school and wanting to staff that up a little higher because it allows staff time to do work during the day that they can't do right now. Because everybody is, one class after another, no time to meet, work on things that benefit students, and then the next day happens and the dailiness just takes over without us really being able to stop and make some improvements and intervene or extend learning as needed for students.
Does that answer your question?
It did.
I think in an effort to try to give Dr. Granger and Mr. Thompson as much, get ahead as much as possible, there comes a point where you have contingencies that are in there, but you really need to make a decision. Are we gonna move forward with these people or are we not? Because you can't load them into the budget because those dollars then get loaded into the budget and then you're not hitting that 4% number. So we're rapidly at that point where we need to make some final decisions as far as can we budget to do this now or can we not? And if we can't, doesn't mean that it can't be done later. If more people show up more students show up in the fall, that's fine. But as far as the budget document, we're very rapidly approaching that. We need to make final decisions on things so that we know what to load in.
And I think the general feeling is that the way you set the budgeted enrollment, we've done it conservative enough where based on what has happened in the last few years and based on what we think is gonna happen, we've done it conservative enough where there should be some growth, there's some opportunity there. But there's no guarantees, we have to wait until we see them.
I agree.
All right, we are next gonna do the oath of office for our new superintendent. All this and the next one, everything goes into effect on July 1st, we're just doing it now, so. Okay. All right, I guess you have to raise your right hand.
Yes.
Okay, if you would repeat after me, please. I, Chris Granger, do solemnly swear
I, Chris Granger, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the state of Washington,
and the state of Washington,
and will faithfully perform the duties of Superintendent, Secretary of Sultan School District, number
Will
311,
faithfully perform the duties of Superintendent and Secretary of the School Board, Sultan School District number 311,
in the County of Snohomish,
in the County of Snohomish,
State of Washington,
State of Washington,
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
We're getting closer.
The next item is the approval of authorization and signature forms. These are all the things that we as a board have to sign to get him set up. And we will sign those after the meeting. So I just need a motion to approve authorization and signature forms.
I make a motion to approve the authorization and signature forms for our new superintendent.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. We have executive session? Yes, we have how long?
Probably at least 30.
30 minutes, okay. So we are actually done. So let's take a 10-minute break and then,
Before we adjourn, I wanna recognize Cameron
Yeah.
Skeet for
that's my next.
all of her service.
So we have something on, allow Cameron to come to the business meeting, next business meeting. You don't have to say the whole time, for a little bit, because we have something special for you then.
Okay, thank you.
Because my brain was like, there's still one more meeting in June, and then I'm like, wait, seniors are done.
Yes.
So yes, we really appreciate it, but if you come
I
to
will.
the next one, and we will have something for you then.
Thank you.
You'll be
Thank you
surprised
for all that you've
Yes.
done. We appreciate it.
Thank you,
Pleasure.
Kim.
though. She's been our guinea pig, really, so.
You've done an
yeah,
excellent job.
We appreciate
Congratulations.
that.
We got lucky with this one. She wanted it so bad. She was the only applicant and she was so driven to start it. So you made it easy. Thanks.
All right, so we will take a 10-minute break, we'll come back at, let's say, 6:45, 9 minutes, and then we'll have a 30-minute executive session. So can I get a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn to executive session.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you.